They thought they were framing an innocent woman. Instead, they just handed their case to the DEA agent who'd been hunting them all along. Detective Maya Rhodes drives home after a long night of surveillance, the rain pounding against her windshield as she navigates the empty streets of Chicago. 3 months undercover with the Dominguez cartel have taken their toll, but tonight she finally secured the evidence needed to bring down not just the drug operation, but also the corrupt officers on their payroll. She's exhausted but satisfied, knowing that tomorrow she'll hand everything over to her DEA superiors, and the case will finally move forward. As Maya turns onto a street, blue lights suddenly flash in her rearview mirror. She pulls over, confused but not concerned. 2 officers approach her vehicle, Detectives Wilson and Martinez from the 31st Precinct. She recognizes them from her investigation as potential subjects in the corruption probe, but they've never met her. Maya rolls down her window, maintaining her cover as a civilian. License and registration, Wilson demands, his tone unnecessarily harsh. Maya complies, keeping her DEA credentials hidden. As she hands over her documents, Martinez leans in, shining his flashlight throughout her car. "Mind if we take a look around?" he asks, but it's not really a question. Before Maya can respond, Wilson opens her door. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Maya weighs her options. She could reveal her identity now, but that would compromise months of work and potentially put her in danger if these officers are as corrupt as she suspects. Instead, she complies, planning to file a complaint later. As she stands in the rain, Wilson searches her car while Martinez keeps her distracted with questions about her evening. "Found something," Wilson calls out triumphantly, holding up a small bag of white powder. Maya's eyes widen in genuine shock. She knows it's not hers. "That's not mine," she states firmly, maintaining her composure despite the obvious frame job unfolding before her eyes. Martinez smirks as he cuffs her. That's what they all say. The holding cell is cold and uncomfortable. Maya sits on the metal bench, keeping to herself as she plans her next move. She could call her handler, but that would blow her cover completely. If she's right about Wilson and Martinez being connected to the Dominguez cartel, revealing herself now could compromise the entire operation and put other agents at risk. Instead, she decides to play along, gather evidence, and document everything. She's allowed one phone call, which she uses to contact her neighbor and friend Sandra, asking her to feed her cat. A prearranged code that signals to Sandra that Maya needs her to contact Maya's DEA handler with a non-urgent message. The next morning, Maya is brought before Judge Calloway for arraignment. The courtroom is busy, filled with the usual morning cases. Maya stands straight, her expression neutral as the charges are read. Possession with intent to distribute. The judge looks at her with the tired eyes of someone who's heard it all before. "How does the defendant plead?" the judge asks, already reaching for his gavel. "Not guilty, Your Honor," Maya responds confidently. She notices Wilson and Martinez at the back of the courtroom, looking smug. They don't realize they've just made the biggest mistake of their careers. The prosecutor, a young woman named Sarah Chen, approaches the bench. "Your Honor, the defendant was caught with 20 grams of cocaine during a routine traffic stop. We request bail be set at $50,000. Maya's court-appointed attorney, a harried public defender named David Clark, barely looks up from his notes. "Your Honor, my client has no prior record and strong ties to the community. We request release on her own recognizance." Judge Calloway sets bail at $25,000, and Maya is led back to holding to await processing. As she's escorted out, she catches Wilson whispering something to Martinez, both of them laughing. Maya commits their faces, words, and actions to memory. Evidence collection has already begun. 3 days later, Maya sits in a conference room at the courthouse, waiting for her preliminary hearing. She's been bailed out, thanks to Sandra contacting her handler, but she's still maintaining her cover. Her attorney, David Clark, shuffles through papers, clearly overwhelmed by his caseload. "Look, Ms. Rhodes, the evidence against you is strong," he says, not making eye contact. "The officers found drugs in your car. Your best bet is to take a plea deal. First offense, you might get probation." Maya leans forward. "Those drugs were planted, Mr. Clark. And I need you to request all body camera footage from that night." Clark looks up, surprised by her confidence. "They'll say the cameras malfunctioned. It happens all the time." "Request it anyway," Maya insists. "And I want a full discovery of both officers' disciplinary records." Before Clark can respond, the door opens and a tall, well-dressed man enters. "I'll be taking over Ms. Rudd's defense," he announces, handing Clark a business card. Jonathan Michaels, attorney at law. Clark looks relieved as he gathers his things. After he leaves, Michaels sits down across from Maya. "Your handler sent me," he says quietly. "We need to talk strategy. The DEA wants to use this situation to our advantage. Those officers have been under investigation for months, but we haven't been able to catch them in the act. Until now." Maya nods, understanding immediately. "So we proceed with the case but build our own in the process." "Exactly," Michaels confirms. "We'll use discovery to access information we couldn't get before. And when the time is right, we'll reveal who you really are." The preliminary hearing is tense. Wilson and Martinez take the stand, recounting their version of events with practiced precision. Maya watches them lie under oath, noting every inconsistency for later use. Michaels cross-examines them expertly, laying traps they don't even recognize. "Officer Wilson, you stated in your report that you pulled over Ms. Rhodes for a broken taillight. Is that correct?" Michaels asks. Wilson nods confidently. "Yes, that's correct." "And yet," Michaels continues, "the impound report shows both taillights were functioning properly. Can you explain that discrepancy?" Wilson shifts uncomfortably. "Must have been a mistake in the report." As the hearing continues, Maya notices a familiar face in the back of the courtroom. Captain Rodriguez from Internal Affairs, who she'd briefed on the corruption investigation months ago. Their eyes meet briefly, and he gives her a subtle nod. The pieces are falling into place. After the hearing, Judge Calloway rules that there is sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Outside the courtroom, Wilson approaches Maya, speaking low enough that only she can hear. "You should have taken the plea deal," he warns. "Things are only going to get worse for you." Maya meets his gaze steadily. "I'm looking forward to my day in court, detective." The trial begins 2 months later. By now, Maya has worked closely with both her DEA team and Internal Affairs to build a case against Wilson, Martinez, and 3 other officers involved in the corruption ring. Today is the day everything comes to light. The courtroom is packed as the prosecution presents its case. Wilson and Martinez once again take the stand, telling the same story they've been repeating for months. But this time, when Michaels stands for cross-examination, everything changes. "Detective Wilson," Michaels begins, "are you familiar with DEA agent Maya Rhodes?" Wilson looks confused. "No, I'm not." Michaels approaches the bench and hands the judge a document. "Your Honor, at this time, the defense would like to submit evidence that the defendant, Maya Rhodes, is in fact a Drug Enforcement Administration special agent who has been working undercover to investigate corruption within the Chicago Police Department." The courtroom erupts in chaos. The judge bangs his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Wilson and Martinez exchange panicked glances as Captain Rodriguez stands and moves toward them, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. Furthermore, Michaels continues once the room quiets, "We have evidence that detectives Wilson and Martinez deliberately planted narcotics in Agent Rhodes' vehicle as retaliation for her investigation into their criminal activities." Maya rises from her seat, finally able to reveal her true identity. She retrieves her badge from Michael's and holds it up for the court to see. "Your Honor," she addresses the judge directly, "I request that the charges against me be dismissed and that Detectives Wilson and Martinez be taken into custody for tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances." Judge Calloway, visibly stunned, looks from Maya to the officers and back again. In light of this extraordinary development, this court will take a 1-hour recess. Detective Wilson and Martinez, you are not to leave this courthouse. The culmination of Maya Rhodes' journey and serves as the resolution to the complex narrative established throughout the screenplay. Set 6 months after the dramatic courtroom revelation of Maya's true identity, this final act provides closure while simultaneously suggesting the ongoing nature of institutional reform. It is a detailed exploration of the themes, character arcs, narrative techniques, and symbolic elements at play in this concluding act. The decision to return to the same courtroom, where Maya was once the defendant, creates a powerful narrative symmetry. This location has transformed from a place where justice was perverted to one where it is finally being served. The courtroom itself becomes a character in the narrative, a space that has witnessed both corruption and redemption. Maya stands in the witness box rather than at the defendant's table. This physical repositioning visually represents her reclaimed power and the restoration of proper order. The same space that once threatened to imprison her unjustly now serves as the venue for true justice. This spatial reversal emphasizes how systems can be reclaimed and repurposed when brave individuals are willing to work from within to expose corruption. Wilson and Martinez, once cocky and seemingly untouchable officers who abused their authority, are now reduced to defeated defendants. Their transformation is most evident in the description of Wilson's face, which has lost its smugness and now displays defeat and anger. This visual cue signals the complete reversal of fortune and power. The trial of Wilson, Martinez, and 9 other officers illustrates the cascading effect of Maya's actions. What began as 2 corrupt officers framing an innocent woman has expanded into a large-scale investigation that has exposed a network of corruption. This expansion of consequences demonstrates how a single act of justice can create ripple effects throughout an entire system. The overwhelming evidence against them indicates that Maya's strategic decision to maintain her cover and gather evidence from within the system was ultimately successful. The line, "Once Maya's identity was revealed, dozens of other officers came forward with information," suggests that her actions created a safe space for honest officers to break the blue wall of silence, implying that many were waiting for someone brave enough to take the first step. Maya's testimony serves multiple narrative functions. On the surface level, it provides the legal evidence needed to convict the corrupt officers. On a character level, it allows Maya to reclaim her voice after being silenced and powerless during her own arraignment and preliminary hearing. The eye contact Maya makes with Wilson during her testimony creates a powerful moment of recognition between the framer and the framed. This silent exchange speaks volumes about power, justice, and consequences. Wilson, who once looked down on Maya with contempt, must now face the reality that she was several steps ahead of him all along. Maya's detailed exposition about the officer's protection of the Dominguez cartel confirms what was previously only implied in the narrative. This revelation connects all the story threads: her undercover work, the corrupt officers, and the drug operation, providing narrative satisfaction by displaying how all elements of the plot were interconnected. Director Keller's appearance outside the courthouse transitions the narrative from the conclusion of one chapter to the beginning of another. The mention of a commendation from Washington acknowledges that Maya's actions have been recognized at the highest levels, validating her risky decision to maintain her cover even when framed. However, Maya's immediate question about the ones who didn't come forward reveals her true character. Rather than basking in personal recognition, she remains focused on the larger mission of systemic reform. This demonstrates that her commitment was never about personal glory, but about justice and institutional integrity. Keller's response that, "We're still investigating, and it's going to take time to clean house completely," establishes that while this case represents significant progress, the work of reform is ongoing. This realistic acknowledgement prevents the ending from feeling too neat or simplistic, recognizing that institutional change is a marathon, not a sprint. The brief interaction between Maya and the young female officer across the street creates one of the most subtle yet powerful moments in the act. This younger officer's respectful nod and Maya's return gesture symbolize the passing of inspiration from one generation to the next. Without words, this exchange suggests that Maya's actions have inspired others within the system, particularly other women in law enforcement who may face similar challenges of discrimination and corruption. This small moment expands the impact of Maya's actions beyond the immediate case, suggesting that her courage will inspire others to stand up against corruption in the future. It implies a continuing legacy that extends beyond the time frame of the screenplay. The final conversation between Maya and Keller in the car provides insight into Maya's growth and the wisdom she has gained through this ordeal. Keller's observation that most agents would have broken cover that night acknowledges the exceptional nature of Maya's decision and the personal risk she undertook. Maya's response, "Sometimes you have to go through the system to fix it," encapsulates the philosophical heart of the screenplay. Rather than working solely from the outside, Maya recognized the value of experiencing the system's failures firsthand, even at personal cost. Her addition of, "I just didn't expect to have to go through it in handcuffs," adds a touch of wry humor that demonstrates her resilience and ability to maintain perspective even after traumatic experiences. The description of the courthouse as where justice is finally being served confirms the restoration of proper order while acknowledging that it is an ongoing process. The line, "The road to cleaning up the department will be long," reinforces the realistic perspective that institutional change is gradual and requires sustained effort. A compressed time frame, 6 months later, to show the consequences of the dramatic revelation in Act V. This time jump allows the narrative to avoid the procedural details of the investigation and trial preparation, focusing instead on the emotional and thematic resolution. The act is structured to provide closure on multiple levels: legal justice, the trial of the corrupt officers, professional recognition, the commendation, personal vindication, Maya's testimony, and systemic impact, other officers coming forward. This multi-layered resolution addresses all the narrative tensions established throughout the screenplay. The pacing of this final act is deliberately measured, contrasting with the dramatic tension of Act V's revelation scene. This slower pacing allows the audience to process the significance of events and reflect on the journey alongside Maya. The screenplay's final sentence, "The corrupt officers thought they were framing an innocent woman, but instead, they revealed themselves to the very person who had been hunting them all along," serves as both plot summary and thematic statement. It encapsulates the central irony of the narrative, while emphasizing that corruption often contains the seeds of its own destruction. This conclusion reinforces the idea that justice, though sometimes delayed, eventually finds its course. It also suggests that those who abuse power often become blinded by their own sense of impunity, making them vulnerable to the very accountability they believe they've escaped. Within the broader cultural context, Act V's resolution speaks to contemporary concerns about police corruption, racial profiling, and systemic reform. By showing a black female protagonist successfully navigating and ultimately reforming a corrupt system from within, the screenplay offers a hopeful perspective on the possibility of change, while acknowledging the difficulty and personal cost of such transformation. The screenplay avoids simplistic, "all police are corrupt," or "just a few bad apples" narratives, instead presenting a nuanced view where corruption exists alongside integrity, where systems can be both flawed and redeemable, and where individual moral courage can catalyze institutional change. This elevates what might have been a straightforward crime drama into a meditation on justice, institutional integrity, and personal sacrifice. By focusing on the aftermath rather than merely the climactic revelation, this final act ensures that the screenplay offers not just narrative satisfaction but thematic depth. It reminds us that true resolution isn't found in dramatic moments of revelation, but in the patient work of rebuilding that follows.